All right. Well, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday, March 19th. It's a glorious day in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been attending the APEC, which is a power semiconductors show, and lots of fascinating things going on in the semiconductor world. And Dr. John Butler is in Austin, and I think our guest is in Austin as well. And then we have today our wonderful Linda Gasparello, um, filling in for Mr. King. And whenever she fills in, she does a better job. I wonder if we're gonna ever have Mr. King back because, Linda
I have
does a
no
better
one to pick
job.
on then. I don't have no one to pick on.
Oh my gosh, flattery will get you everywhere.
So, so in any event, Johnny, before we get started, why don't you just play some guitar for us?
I'm gathered around people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters all around you have grown, and accept that as soon you'll be drenched to the bone. For your time is properly changing. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand. For the times they are changing. From mothers and fathers throughout the land. And don't criticize what you can't understand. Sons and your daughters are beyond your command. The whole world is rapidly changing. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand. For the times they are changing.
All right, very
I know Linda remembers
nice,
that. I know Claudiu never.
very nice.
I know I remember that.
I know you remember that great author. How are you doing today?
Great. How about you? As I
I'm
said, we
good.
got the message here with
We got
our.
the message. We got the message.
Uniform, the uniform. So Johnny and Linda, the world is moving fast, shifting fast. There's all kinds of things going on. I'm kind of losing track of really what to focus on. It's an incredible distraction. But we have a great guest today to talk about high tech. So, Johnny, what's going on with you?
Well, you know what's going on with me. I have spent a lot of times with people at coffee shops talking about what's going on with the world, especially with the relationship between China and the southern hemisphere. And the academic questions, of course, eggheads like us, we like to say, do our theory still hold? It's the center of enterprise from the Western world. As a matter of fact, it has gone not from just a discussion of China, but from a discussion of the West. And civilization on its last leg. Questions like would China take the place of America when it comes to being benevolent? Questions like when China speaks of spreading technologies throughout the Southern Hemisphere and getting new kinds of customers, America's talking more about war. But the big question is, to what extent has the East jumped us or leaped over us in terms of technology and technology change? So we've gone from, of course, all countries copy, if you will, but we've gone from a culture that's rapidly, and I taught there for 3 summers at the University of Beijing, and what I did notice was that 70% of the students were majoring in the sciences there at Beijing. Wonderful, wonderful students, wonderful people. But I think it's a question that we have to ask ourselves, because as I'm not going to do America, I'm going to do the West. As the West moved forward, and remember, it was the West who brought logic. It was the West who got civilizations away uh, from religion to science. Is why we have jet airplanes. Is why we have electricity. It's why we have lots of the modern things that we call modern. If we look at the rest, not just the West, they also have these things now. So they have learned lots of technology from the West. And of course, at the end, Andreas, it means, what does it mean for, do you have a future? So now, we can talk about the future for China. The East is very, very excited about their future. Everything shows that the West is kind of down on their future. There's a lot of negativity in the West as we try to kill our culture, whereas the East, as defined by China, is moving forward. So I've been spending a lot of time, reading on that. It's very, very interesting. I'm also now evaluating my companies for the CNBC, Creative Destructive Technologies. And the flip side of what I said is that America is really, really moving when it comes to a technology. That is, the ideas to solve different kind of problems are there, and the ideas of the interaction. But the big thing is that we have a globalization of commerce, whereas in America, we're taking more of a nationalistic approach with the and I think that the new president, in the long run, not the short run, the idea that America could bring a future back for 50% of those who are not on the stock market, who have not benefited from technology. And I think he has the view that our technology companies gave all the jobs to the East. We made a deal with China that said, okay, you can make our stuff, but we're going to keep our IP, and then we're going to buy the stuff from you, and then you're going to send the money back, IP, and we're going to invest it, but we lost our jobs. So I think that it's going to be a deep, deep pill to swallow for America to bring jobs back, and for 50% of Americans who are not on the stock market, like I am, to have a future. So I think we're in a very, very interesting situation. The globalization of the world, with all of the supply chain, is a reality. But when you turn to nationalism, then it's a different kinds of ideas. So this is why the president doesn't care much about the stock market. I think that for the first time in my life, the Republican Party is now a working class party. And I think that was done through the Tea Party. So when I worked for President Bush, it was I had a president appointment with W. It was a Republican Party, with the exception of the Southern Republicans who were more Dixiecrats, I think. But they came into the Republican Party with a different kind of flair, if you will. But I think for the biggest thing that I see politically is that the Republican Party is now a working class party.
Well, appreciate that, Johnny. Linda, similarly with you, lots of stuff going on. I know you guys travel all over and got a heavy schedule of conferences and stuff. And what's going on in your world?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, Johnny, I agree with many of the things that you said about us vis-a-vis the East. And I'm very much hoping that plans will work out for those who are not vested in the market, which has been an amazing source of wealth for those who have been vested in the market. But if we were to look at just the past few days, it's really, really hard, as Andreas said, to process everything that has happened in the past 50 or so days. It's just being thrown at us with such speed. It's really hard to pull it all together. So I'd just like to look at just a little microcosm in just the past few days and try to give you an opinion, my own opinion of what I think might be going on. So if we were to look at the past few days in terms of team wins and losses, kind of like March Madness in college basketball. I'd say that Team US chalked up a really spectacular win with the return of the two NASA astronauts, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, on the SpaceX Dragon. Anybody that saw that happen would be so proud of America and its accomplishments and our technology, and what that brought in terms of visuals to the world was really magnificent. That is the America that I know, the can-do America, the America of great possibility and great technology. But I see it as being a loss with President Trump's call yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin's game is very clear and it's very consistent in Ukraine. And that is to continue his war in Ukraine and lead Americans by the nose. Putin has given up nothing by agreeing to an energy ceasefire, which is giving him a respite from the drone attacks on some of Russia's biggest oil refineries, which since the start of 2025 have knocked out about 4% of Russia's refining capacity. By talking with Trump about cooperation in the Middle East, Putin has furthered his interest in returning to the top diplomatic table as a peer of the United States. We, of course, have prevented him from doing that with our sanctions on him. And this is something that he has wished for, and it's now being delivered by President Trump. Putin has an imperial game plan, and he's using all means, his real and his hybrid wars, to win. With NATO teetering, which is part of his strategy that's working with Trump too, he's sharpening his sights on Europe. And just a few days ago, Poland and the Baltic countries have agreed to lay landmines in their countries when time comes. So Trump continues to weaken our stature in the world. And again, on Saturday, he did it with the shutdown of something that really got under Putin's skin, and that was Voice of America. And for full disclosure, I have been a guest, as has my husband, Llewellyn King, on Voice of America, talking about the best of America. That's what we always did on any service that we were asked to appear on. And I remember I did so in March, talking about the best of American women in the month of March, which is the time that they're celebrated in the United States. And of course, White House Chronicle, the show I produce and which my husband hosts, was carried on Voice of America. So it's a personal loss for us, and it's a personal loss for the nation.
Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
My apologies.
Andrea,
I'm excited talking, and I'm not even paying attention to what's going on with the buttons. So we have a great guest today, and I think that it'd be interesting to hear where the technology curve in acceleration is heading. We are lucky to have Claudiu Barsan-Pipu, CEO and Creative Director of MetaNeural Inc., with us. And MetaNeural Inc. has built a leading XR SaaS platform for experienced immersive hazard prevention training in real time. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot of that. And obviously we have had all kinds of wildfires and climate issues and challenges. And maybe right now it is the quietest time of the year, sort of, winter going away, spring is coming before the madness begins again in the summer, which I think is going to be a hot one in Texas and probably in the nation. So Claudio, welcome into the program. How are you?
Thank you for having me. It's nice seeing you again, Andres and John. I had the pleasure of meeting you both at the Digital 360 Summit last September last year, and it was a pleasure seeing you there. So I've been doing good. The company's been getting a lot of, let's say, traction. We're growing, and actually, hopefully, this is the future of XR training that we're trying to basically pioneer here. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of introduction about the company beyond what you said, and thank you for the nice introduction. What we're trying to do at MetaNeural, and I'm going to also go back to the origin story of the company, but we're trying to approach a problem that has faced basically a lot of people in the last, let's say, 10 years or more, since XR became really powerful, or it should have become a very, very powerful, if not the most powerful training tool. So this didn't really happen because of some reasons that we identified, some problems that we have to face today in having to do with the scalability of XR training, the pricing, the time it takes to deliver, but also the complexity of the models you can simulate, right? So XR, it's a wonderful, like especially VR, it's a wonderful environment for it's the best, it's proven to be the best way to teach someone something very fast, because it actually appeals to two things. It appeals to the emotional component, and also creates hand-to-eye coordination systems and all of that, which conventional, let's say 2D or what we call 2.5D training in front of a monitor cannot afford. Now, this is all fine, but it's again, we're missing out hugely on what's really possible if you have the complex system that need to be set in place to be able to do the training that actually matters. You were mentioning before some hazards that are happening, and you also, Linda, you were mentioning the huge success of bringing astronauts from the space station. However, we have to mention the reason that they were trained for 9 months, right? Sometimes you have this kind of what we call a series of unfortunate little events in a series of unfortunate, let's say, cadence, which is why usually these kind of problems get through the filter of regular or conventional training models, right? So we're trying to solve that problem. We're trying to approach how can we build affordable, fast, intuitive, but also immersive and highly complex training simulations that actually help, that can be used to basically, I don't know, let's say, anticipate those impossible situations that actually in the real world prove to be the causes of most, let's say, problems in the world. So we started, I'm going back now to MetaNeural's story. We're a startup that was founded last year in March, and we are Delaware C Corp, but as we became part of the International Accelerator, it's a program based in Austin, led by Angelos, which we actually want to thank a lot for the support and everything there. I mean, I think it's a very, very famous, let's say, Austin person that has helped so many companies and so many people basically grow and develop. So we were fortunate enough, and we were fortunate to have him on our advisory board and to have his support. So with his support and the support of International Accelerator, we managed to actually bring this vision to life, and we're working actively to extend it. We started again based on our experience before MetaNeural. Both myself and my co-founder Stefan Kasapu, we worked for about 8 years in the field of basically building XR and VR training simulations the old-fashioned way, let's call it in the consultancy model, right? And by doing so, we kind of realized what the problems are within the space. And I'm going to just mention a few, and then of course, I'll let you guys comment on what I'm saying, because I'm also very curious to see the feedback of people that have been active in the space or tangentially connected to the training need. Like you said, we have the US has a need of training people fast, affordable, but also to the quality and to the level that is required to be able for them to work in semiconductor factories or to work in basically very dangerous context and have those people trained to be able to cope with different situations in which different things can happen potentially at the same time, right? So I'm going to start with this kind of problem, which is basically the limitation of the current VR space, which have to do with the fact that you have an expert and then you have a development team, which sometimes it's internal, sometimes external, and they have to do this kind of back and forth between the knowledge of the expert and the understanding of the programmers, right? And sometimes the other way around, right? What the programmers have to tell the experts what they can do and what they can't do, and also the time it takes to build and the money. And sometimes this kind of, let's say, back and forth leads to some what we call suboptimal results, because they have to kind of settle in to a kind of middle ground where the price is not too high, the time is not too big, but still the company gets some value from the training. And that leads to usually to what we call the linear training, which you have like a one-way scenarios, which you do once, which is very cool, and then the second time you run them, you already know what's going to happen, and it decreases in value unless you run it on a high number of people, right? That's one of the reasons that VR training is not adopted as much as it's good. Of course, it's always about money and time, but I'm talking about the one of the main problems that we're trying to solve at MetaNeural. We're aiming directly at the experts to be able to build the simulation by themselves. The second part is, of course, it's important to see, okay, how complex are these simulations? Are they really helping the companies, right? And here we are talking about advanced simulation and multi-stage scenarios. So just to give you a brief overview, and then I'm going to continue later after we have a little bit more, let's say, discussion on this topic. We're trying to change the way that that the industry is addressing the training process, from shifting the power from the programmers to the actual content matter experts. And of course, we use AI and we use all of the latest technologies. So I have to say that without the current progress in software and hardware, this would have not been possible, right? So this is what we do. We're trying to democratize training, to bring the smaller companies for them to have VR training, while also making the training process more complex, more relevant, and more affordable. So that's pretty much like an overview of what we do.
Claude, yeah, first of all, it's so good to have you on the program, and I do have some questions. And I tell you what, let me give you just a case study in John Butler. One of the most interesting courses I had at 7:30 in the morning was Logic, Logic. Okay, and Logic predated, of course, what we call coding in computer science, right? If P, then Q. I would have to take the speech of someone and write it all out in symbolic logic. It seems like to me you're interacting with the neural networks of the body, because this is what logic did. Logic was not simply something that you memorized. Logic brought in, before we knew it, it brought in the neural networks, right, of the brain. Before, that's why we call it logic, right? So I know that logic, the first computer science professors were professors of logic. So my first question is this: if you look at training and taking the training to the experts, what is the background of the software that you're doing? In other words, you're doing learning, right? You're doing machine learning as you train. And to me, machine learning has gone from, we tell the machine what to do, a computer what to do, and then I can write a program to do that, to now, the more it learns, right, then it can make decisions on what it wants to do. And I see that going back to the core disciplines of logic. I see it going back to the core disciplines of psychology and neuroscience. So from a philosophical basis, what are you trying to implement in the training that is so different than me learning how to play, I don't know, classic guitar, me learning how to play how to manage a team? What's different about your training? I understand what you want to do. What's the philosophy? Are you doing neuroscience secretly? What are you doing?
So thank you for the question, John. I'll start with actually the answer with the name of the company, right? So MetaNeural actually
Yeah.
combines to the answer to your question. It's meta, not only that the metaverse, but also going beyond it, like the philosophical notion of meta, but also the neural, which is not only neural network, but also this kind of neural interfacing and all of this kind of neural feedback, right? So basically, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to combine these concepts, right? Some of them are straightforward, the metaverse, although not very common, but still trying to be defined, the metaverse and the neural networking part, so the AI part, but also we're going deeper. That's what I like about our name, that it goes beyond the obvious, right? We're going beyond like the meta and also the neural part of the neural field. So yes, we're not only using neural networks to do a lot of things in our platform, basically orchestrating the scenarios, having the AI based on the user inputs, like the data that they put in, the three-dimensional data and the two-dimensional data combined together. So by creating what we call a spatially aware AI, which is a special type of AI that is now being more and more, let's say, developed, attaching, let's say, non-spatial information to spatial information. That's one aspect. And again, these advanced AI models that we're using are able to understand what's going on, to create the scenarios, but also to help you, for example, troubleshoot problems, right? And yes, we took into account the neurological aspect. We have basically in the work, and we did it in the past, to use, let's say, EEG, so brain-computer interfacing, to actually monitor how people react in real time and to adapt this training to these, let's say, neural patterns, right? So, for example, if someone is stressed or someone is confused, we know what happens, and if we're in the training stage, we can help them like make the training more adaptable. And if they're in an assessment phase, then we can actually pin out those weak spots and try to identify those, let's say, problematic areas where the training was potentially not sufficient, right? So yes, we're exploring that front, and we're exploring basically a lot of neural models. So from a philosophical point of view, if you want, we're trying to go beyond the obvious and trying to find those technologies, but also those methodologies or approaches that will afford us to actually explore the human mind and the neural networks of the human mind versus the neural networks of the AI, and have them work together and kind of empower each other.
Yeah, before we get to the practical, let me just spend a little bit more on the science, because that's what's exciting to me. If you look at, we know now, you know, what they are doing now in imaging the brain is they have nodes, or what we call neurons. And then, of course, we've tried to put that into, I mean, it started also with networking and sociology out of Stanford. And now we try to connect what we know about the brain, right, right, to our software. But here's the big question right here. I think that, you know, we have something that's called structural holes in physics, because it all relates just theoretically. Also in the brain, that is, you got the networks of the brain going on. And then when a new something develop in the brain, it goes through a structural holes and create a whole nother network. So my question is this. All right, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to use your method of training, right? So now not only do you know what I'm reading, right? You also understand how my brain is reacting to the fact that it's third and fourth, right? With 2 seconds left, right? My brain, you know now that I react in a certain way, right? That the CEO is now sitting in the room with me, right? To make sure that I have done the training. What are your indications? What are your indications that the training is working? How does your training differ from just, you know, what always has amazed me is Andres Cavallo can pick up a guitar and take 10,000 lessons, and he would never ever learn to play guitar.
That's nasty.
My grandfather played blues guitar. I pick up a guitar and I pick it up right away. It's the same thing in training. Are you going to tell me now then you'll be able to train anybody regardless based on your method? And that's a real scientific breakthrough if that's true. So just tell me, what's the indication that it's working?
So
and then we get to the practical side.
So without any,
I just finished a paper on social physics, so all this stuff is new to me.
Makes sense. So again, like you said, people have different, let's say, talents or different, let's say, sensitivities to different things, and some of them are genetic, some of them are based on the, let's say, their behavior, and then how they were raised. Were they raised in a? I'm going to use your metaphor. Are they basically, have they been exposed to music, to a music world since childhood? And again, Andrea, I don't know how well you play the guitar, and I'm sure you can definitely do better than John says. So I'm being a jazz piano player myself and being self-taught, I can relate to some of the struggles and some of the, let's say, the elements that are good and bad in the, say, this sort of learning. What I can tell you is this: by trying to find a baseline for each individual user, this is what we're trying to do, right? We are moving away from the idea that everyone is similar. Like, we're not similar. We may be in some cases on some small groups, but each of us have our own profile. And you mentioned that very well. Each of us have their own neural network, and it's more flexible in some spaces, and it's more adaptive, and it's more responsive to some things. What we're trying to do is to take this from a generic or generalization of what a trainee is, right? Because, and then again, this is what most solutions today think. One person or one trainee should behave the same as the other, and is the same as the other person. We're saying no, that's not true. That's definitely not true. In some cases, you may have huge differences in the way that people learn, in the speed that they manage to absorb information, and basically what they respond better to. Some people are more abstract thinkers, and they prefer to say more this kind of more abstract, and others are more visual thinkers, right? And of course, that translates to whatever artistic, let's call it artistic sensitivities versus abstract reasoning, right? Now, I didn't mention, we're using a complex system that is trying to basically, as I said, identify this baseline for each individual user based on, you're using multiple system eye tracking. We're using this kind of, let's say, analyzing as I said, their emotional response to specific things. So we know where people are, what they are looking at, and how do they feel about that thing, right? Because you can have someone that kind of scans the space and seems to be doing a great job, but in fact, it is doing that because of being confused and being lost. And you can have someone that is doing the same operation, basically the same pattern, but with a much let's say, more control. He's totally on top of the things and he understands and so forth, right? And also we use our solution to, I think, something very interesting, to identify the right leaders or the right person for the specific job, because on paper you can have someone that has a perfect resume for a job, right? He should be the lead, safety, whatever. But when exposed to real scenarios, it's proven that that person responds very poorly to stress. And so all of these things that we're doing are trying to kind of identify let's say, the best way to train someone. And our system is trying to dynamically, again, pinpoint the best way to kind of get that training. And again, it's all about baselines for each individual, and we're trying to kind of explore the space and we try to learn. I also started a PhD, interesting enough, in China before the pandemic, and there I was exploring the relation between the human mind and the human emotion versus space. Different type of spaces, right? Now from that research and I moved to this kind of, let's say, space where actually it's not only about the space, but it's about the context, the more complex context of the space, plus the information, the operation, and all of that things, right? So to answer your question, we're doing things differently because we're considering in the individual specifics instead of just going for the global united or unified user, right? I don't believe that's true. Every person is different. They need a different way to learn, to maximize their potential. So in this case, for Andres, we can definitely find a way to convey the musical, or even translate the musical space into something that maybe, and again, Andres, I'm sorry, I'm sure that you're a talented.
Work on golf too. Work on golf while you're doing it, right? No, I have some more questions, but I will give the floor to my distinguished colleague, Linda.
Why, thank you so much, Johnny. I've got a couple of questions. Claudiu, you had said that the company is about a month old now. It's a startup company.
It's almost a year old, like a year old.
I'm sorry, about a year old. Okay. So I'm thinking of March Madness. We're only about a month into it now, less than a month. So it's about a year old. So are you deploying your technology, your training technology, anywhere right now with any company that you can tell us how they've fared? And the other thing is that I know with the economy, when you get ups, you tend to get CEOs that are very interested in experimenting with new technology. You know, I used to call it, I worked for Forbes magazine for many years, and we used to call it the need to have versus the nice to have stuff. And when the economy is good, you get the nice to have stuff. Have you been able to convince companies that this is a need to have, especially at a time where many companies are really not up to speed on AI, especially CEOs? It's hard for them to proselytize to their employees that this is what they need to have when they themselves are really not that familiar with the technology.
It's a very good question, Linda, because whenever you have some disruptive technology, you have basically two types of responses, right? One of them, like you said, in favorable times, people are saying, "Oh, interesting. Let's see what that does, and if it can help us." And some other people are more reticent, and they say, "Let's not be the early adopters. Let's have the technology being tried and tested by someone else, and then we'll be adopting it." The second point you raised is also how much everybody's talking about AI today. Now, they do talk in different ways and at different levels of understanding, right? Our goal and our mission was to say, look, we're not just using buzzwords. We're not just throwing away this kind of nice concepts to get your attention. We're actually trying to prove value, and the value within what we're doing. So to actually answer your point about the traction we have and the actual interest we have, I'm going to also mention two things. First of all, it has to do with the partnerships we managed to establish. And this is very, very important. Again, we're not trying to solve all problems in-house, and that's definitely the key. I mean, it cannot be done otherwise, right? So we managed to have some really interesting partnerships. Some of them are actually Texas and Austin based, right? So we're very happy about that. We're partnering, again, we're building what we call an intelligent digital twin model, right? Which needs to have data coming in, and for this we partner with a company called Computer-Aided, which is based here in Austin. A very nice company that can help us bring that data from any kind of devices, from pumps, from machinery, from buildings into our platform, and we can control things remotely. So this is a project we recently, like a partnership we recently started with them to afford us to do that, and of course afford them to provide their customers with this kind of environments for control. And then we have other partnerships, for example, with Here in Austin, it's Arup Ventures, Arup being one of the main, if not the most important engineering company in the world, right? They build everything in Beijing. They managed to build us, so they have a branch here in Austin, and they have a venture capital, or actually like a venture, let's say, branch that we actually were working with them to partner in developing this kind of interesting solutions. And it's interesting because it's a, let's say, two-way collaboration. We're collaborating with them to integrate their technology into ours, to integrate our technology into theirs, but also through that approach their customer base. And so again, this is a way that we managed to kind of, let's say, get our technology out to the companies. Of course, we started strategic pilots with big companies. I'm not allowed to name a few of them, but they're very big, and I'll just say that they're in the semiconductor space, in the oil and gas space, and with them we're validating the models, and they do see value. We have basically proving some KPIs that each company wants to see, and our most, let's say, appealing factor is, look, you have your experts, you have your data secure, you don't have to share the data with anyone else, which is very, very important. This is a key element. Their models stay in our platform, but we don't get access to them. They're encrypted, so only they can get them. Very important, let's say, selling point for our platform. And then, of course, the fact that they can do, we're the first company to be able to provide scenario as the unit of economics, right? Basically, we can sell scenarios and how many scenarios we can build, because the scenarios take minutes to get built instead of days or months or even sometimes years for same complexity, right? So yes, we're validating the models. We have some very good, let's say, promising results now. And like I said, the key is that the strategic partnership we're making. We're trying to solve the whole problem from A to Z, right? Which is very, very tricky to do. But we're not solving all of the problems ourselves. We're getting the best technologies, the best companies. I think we have about 5 different AI models or even more in our solution. Some of them are developed in-house, some of them are, let's say, adapted from different partners. And this is the key. And to answer the question about this kind of nice to have versus must have, right?
Need to have.
Yes, exactly. You need to have, or it's very important for companies to see the value of what we're proposing, right? Because if they can save one life, or if they can save whatever 1 hour of let's say extra work or work that was not professionally done, then they save in this industries, they save millions of dollars per day, or maybe potentially even per hour, right? So our value proposition is quite let's say remains quite valuable, even if the economy shrinks, and especially in the sectors we're operating with, the more restrictions you have, the more important is that everything is done correctly and perfectly without failure, because failure becomes even more costly when you don't afford the failure, right?
So your first industry sectors are semiconductors and the oil and gas industry. How big do you think the market is for your training? Could you even give us an estimate on how big that might be? And might you identify some of your competitors? Nobody likes to talk about who's out there as competitors, but could you tell us who some of the competition are? XR training, in a general sense, has been around for a while, but yours obviously is super XR training. I mean, you have some very interesting proprietary things that you're working on. For instance, when you said that you're working on spatial ID, I think that's or AI, I think that's a fascinating thing. So just, if you remember everything I've asked you, try to give me an answer to that.
Yeah. So the competition exists, but most of the competition, I'm just going to say how we relate to the competition. I'm going to, if you want, I can mention some companies.
Yeah.
The important thing is that what the competition is doing, and we are different in that, is that they're trying to target either the programmers that are to help them deliver faster training, which again doesn't bypass the problems that I just mentioned before, the
Right.
transfer and all of that, right? The security and all of these things, the risk of exposure, or they're trying to build a system for the experts within those companies to kind of try to code in an alternative matter. So instead of writing proper code, they do some visual symbolic programming or whatever, which is in the end relates to the same thing. And one of the problems I've seen or maybe it's a marketing strategy, is that in the end those companies come back to the same producer and say, look guys, you build that part for us, you are better at this, so do that too, right? So what we're doing differently, first of all, we are offering a solution that uses natural language interfacing as the only means of interaction. So basically you speak with our system and you don't have to learn a very complex UI, UX, very complex experience that usually prevents those companies or the experts to actually adopt something. They don't want to learn a very complex tool on top of what they already have on their mind, right? So our solution is straightforward. Everybody knows how to speak. Everybody knows what they want. Our solution is trying to actually understand what the users wants, and by just talking to the system creates this kind of effect. So just to mention something, because I don't want to basically avoid your question about the competition. We have platforms that are exploring this kind of empowering of the expert space, but as I said, they do it in a different way. There are Education XR, Frontline IO. There are many others in the space that are trying to do this kind of things. Again, our main differentiator is that we're focusing not only on making this process, let's say, cheaper, whatever, more affordable, but making it extremely easy for the experts to come on board and to build this while preserving the power.
Okay, I follow up on that. Do I understand this correctly? So when the technology is deployed in a company, they are not going to have the added expense of having to go to you every time there is a problem. That is a big savings not to have to do that. Instead, they will be able to solve their problems in-house and simply through regular language.
Exactly. That's one of the selling points where we're trying to prove. Again, people say that it's not possible. I heard that many times in my life. My pleasure and privilege was to prove them wrong in a very right way. But yes, so there are some limitations in all technologies, and we're exploring. Again, that's why we work with these companies to see, okay, how far can we go in this? Is it possible to do the whole thing?
In-house, it is.
Initially, we helped them a little bit because, again, we are building together this kind of platforms. But our goal is that the moment we launch phase one at our event in South by Southwest last week. So phase one of the platform.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah, great place to launch.
Yes, exactly. It was a good opportunity. We had a lot of interesting people visiting us and partners visiting us. But also, we managed to say, okay, the most difficult thing we're trying to solve is to get these companies to see that they have already everything they need, right? They just need the proper technology. We're trying to solve those annoying pain points. For example, important right? Optimizing everything, beautifying it. We do all of that for them, right? And we kind of compare to, for example, we had an example from Pfizer where they show their XR pipeline, right? And we look and say, look, we were solving all of these problems automatically. So everything that they had to kind of use different tools and that had to be manually operated by different experts, we do that in our platform, like in a very streamlined pipeline. And this is not easy. Again, we had to do 8 years of basically facing all of these challenges but now we found a solution. And again, the moment is now, the technology is now. We couldn't have done that even last year in terms of we have to wait for some AI models to become better.
Exactly. That's the speed of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is a seize the moment time, and this may exactly be your moment.
I'm sure that it is. I mean, for sure, the location I think is great. Austin is a perfect place because again, we find all of these partners locally. Otherwise, we'd have to search, let's say, much more, and it will be more difficult to establish these partnerships. And I think what I think is different from maybe, let's say, again, I don't have a lot of experience with the East Coast in the sense of how things happen in Silicon Valley, but I think here in Austin, the investors are more, let's say, more calculated, but also they take a more, let's say, they're supporting us, but they also want to see us succeed in a proper way. Exactly the questions you mentioned. Do we have the traction? Do we have the interest? So that is also in a good way, forcing us to validate all of these answers beforehand, not after we get a huge investment and then we said,
exactly.
Product doesn't fit the market. So we're from day one, even from before day one, we wanted to be a customer, let's say, driven developer in the sense of listening to their points and have us as the innovators, let's say the leading force in their to adopt our technology. So it's kind of a balancing act that we're doing now, but we're getting some very good results. And again, we're looking forward to show what our technology can do. One more thing that I want to mention that is lacking in this space is it's a platform that can actually, support all of these companies. Each company so far has been building their own little universe, which and all of these universes, they don't communicate with each other. We want to open this kind of let's say our platform. We want it to be a platform where, for example, a company that builds a compressor and builds their training around that, and then you have a bigger company that wants to, instead of building the whole thing, when they have to integrate a compressor, they just take, right, like a marketplace version, they just adopt the training that the smaller company did. And one important thing based which answers two questions. One of them, how do we approach a market which is now maybe potentially in recession, or maybe we don't know exactly
Yes,
what will happen, and also the adoption. Where because you asked me about the size of the market size, right?
yes.
We estimate that in together, let's say in the European space and in the US space, we have about just in the oil and gas space, we have about 45,000 companies each. So 45,000 in the US, 45,000 in the. Okay, what we do different is that we approach the middle, let's say, tiers of companies, so medium-sized companies, because they can lead us upwards to the big fishes, but also downwards to the companies that before us could never afford to have VR training for their products, because it would be simply prohibitively expensive, or they could not, let's say, they didn't even think about it, right? Or, like I said, a very complex process of understanding what AI does and how our solution targets those customers. So we're basically opening up a completely new market, let's say, uh, chunk to our technology, which before could never have access to this technology, while also making it much more affordable, much more interesting for the bigger companies, where we offer.
So,
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
so Claudio, let me try to make some sense for the folks listening here, looking at the time as well. So according to different research organizations, the online training market using extended reality is roughly going to be a $600 billion market by 2028. Um, it's gigantic. It's training in every vertical. You're a small company. Are you focused on one vertical? How are you going to become the go-to for certain market segments? So how are people going to discover you? How do you what do you focus on, or are you just basically throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what happens?
So we're trying not to see what sticks. We have a strategy that actually starts with the oil and gas space, and moving.
Okay.
Why? Because the oil and gas space affords us to have this kind of almost like a common denominator of all of the industries that we're targeting, right? So all of the interactions, all of the simulation that you have in the oil and space, oil and gas space, you can already translate. You can imagine if we want to move to semiconductor. Semiconductor is a clean room in an oil and gas installation, right? If you want to move to aviation or to aerospace, you have a miniatured or like a very compact oil and gas installation inside the rocket, or you have. So by targeting first the oil and gas market, and building all of these interactions and all of the simulations for this market, it's easy, very easy for us to kind of extend to the other, let's say, adjacent markets, and then from that to move forward. We believe very much that our strategy will be this kind of, let's say, ecosystem approach, in which we're targeting the key points in them, let's say, mid-sized companies that work together. They have these ecosystems. Then they will be our evangelists in promoting the company to
Okay.
also to the bigger and also to the smaller companies. I think this is a very smart way to do it, especially in these kind of industries where conventional marketing doesn't really work. I mean, we're not going to do in Instagram posts, right?
Let me
Johnny.
let me bring some business savvy to this discussion absolutely with no charge. Since Angelo is one of my best friends and one of the great people who help us to develop our ecosystem. And so this is what you're doing. Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, said, there are only individuals, there's no society. And management science problem is, how do you bring different individuals to focus on a task? Or philosophical, is the Hobbesian question of order. Why aren't we all fighting each other? So it seems like to me you've taken the ideas of management science, which is a combination of psychology, sociology, to an extent, economics, and adding tools of computer science to it. You know, I believe that you start with individuals. I think everything else are tools, because I think that's the way I think. So what you're saying is this: regardless of the neural networks of the individual, you have a way of bringing them. Now you're calling them experts. You have substituted the term management
You're breaking up,
Facebook.
Johnny.
Yeah.
Is that better now?
Yes, yes.
We're gonna take the idea of Margaret Mead, who said, "Hey, there's nothing called society, only individuals," and we're gonna say for companies, you got all these weirdos working for you, neural networks running everywhere. People want to do every kind of thing, and I'm going to give management a tool to solve the high-speed questions, which we solve with networks. So the reason why there is an individual, the reason why we can walk, talk, sleep, and etc., is because the neurons running around in our brain, they might be independent, but they have a job to do. So I think you're saying to management, here's a tool that can take all of those neural networks running around in the different individuals and say, no, it is true. It might be that they're only individuals, but we create society, or we create a company, if you will, with my tool.
Yeah.
Which
is, again,
is that it?
right.
All right, now for that statement, 512 CMG, we're not going to charge you $10 million that it's worth. But I want you to market your company as a company that's saying that it's a new management tool for all kinds of individuals to bring them together to complete a task. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's actually.
Now I could market the hell out of that puppy. I can take that puppy to market, and you know what? You would have no competition.
Yeah.
Because what we have now I call it cloud capitalism. Look, here's the deal. Andreas, what has happened is we started with feudalism in Western society, when the feudal lords would, take everything and give you something, right? And then went to machines, and then the capitalists own the machines.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest machine now is the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back to renting. We're back to being serfs. Linda would love this. We're back to being serfs. We're back to being serfs because unless you own the cloud, you can't participate in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is, given the fact that we have now cloud capitalism, right? That's where the money is made in the cloud. It's not made at land anymore. It's not made by machines anymore. Everybody that's operating in the cloud now can solve the problem of Margaret Mead by saying, no, we might have lots of individuals, but we can create a managerial company to get things done. All right? Send me the check. Send me the check. I don't want any. I don't want any tax problem. Just send me $5 million. Tax problem. So, what do you think about that interpretation of what you're doing? Because the complexity is not as. Look, once you move the tools out of the way and go back to human needs of eating, of sleeping, of managing, of working together, of traveling, right? I mean, we have gone through the automobile. We've gone through the great expressways. We've gone through airplanes. But the question is the same thing that Margaret Mead asked. Are there only just individuals? It's the same thing that Hobbes asked, right? How can we create and the same thing that Machiavelli gave us the answer to, which was, well, we are a society. So you're creating a society. If I don't stop talking, I'm gonna have to charge Linda tuition. It seems like to me that we are creating a society in the cloud in a different way that answers the basic everyday needs of individuals.
To some extent, you're right. I mean, this is the end goal. So beyond the industry, one of the things that we consider beyond, like for MetaNeurals, let's say a little bit further future, is can we create beyond all of the training things that we are doing now? Can we create, let's say, social experiences, right? Can we go not only to the technical or industrial aspects of this, but can we actually create worlds that people are going to interact with, or actually they find it more, how to say, more proficient, more warmer, let's say closer. It's like I said, it's a combination of being practical, but also being emotionally involved. I do believe that what we risk losing with all of these technologies of the technologization of things is the emotional component. In our solution now, we're trying to say, okay, the best solution is not just an AI that solves everything. It's the expertise of that person that has been probably working on a oil rig and has literally seen it and heard and smelled everything, right, in his life. So they have this kind of multi-sensorial implication in their field, and then helping them with AI to kind of bridge gaps, not to the knowledge, but also to the other people that they have to either teach or to connect to it to solve the problem. So I'm not sure if this...
Absolutely. And you know, Claude, if Europe, if England and France, if they got to go through Amazon and pay 40% taxes to do it, they don't have anything.
Yeah.
They're a feudal society again. Linda, you're like this.
I know, I'm loving it already.
You're a feudal society if you are not controlling the cloud. If you can't train in the cloud, what do you have? Look, the reason why people want so much information from you, and we give it away. I mean, one time we wouldn't even tell somebody where we live. Now we tell them not only where we live, but we're going on vacation, right? If you do not own what I call the new capitalism, which is cloud market economies, you're out. So Europe is out, right? I mean,
They're definitely sluggisher.
And we pay no taxes to Europe. Amazon pays no taxes for the 90 billion that they made from the Europeans. So to me, your training is saying this. Given the new realities of cloud capitalism, Andreas, call the IP lawyer, John Butler, the new cloud capitalism, right?
I love it.
So what we're doing, what Linda is doing, got to watch Linda, I don't want her going marching now. What Linda is doing, she is paying rent just like the feudal lords paid rent prior to modern Western society. So I pay rent to Amazon. I pay rent, right, for the cloud. What you're doing is saying, hey, I got the training for this new dynamic cloud capitalism, right?
It's a good.
I mean, like that. I mean, I'm just saying. I know you want to send me 10 million now, but you know, I'm Andreas' good friend, so we're not going to charge it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and again, thank you for the.
So I think that's where we're going. So I
Yeah.
do believe I like it.
Yeah,
I want to get Linda's response though. She was surprised that she was a surf again.
No, listen, I was, the motto of Forbes magazine was capitalist tool, right? I was a capitalist tool for a very long time, so I can really understand what cloud capitalism means and how I'm part of cloud capitalism or not part of it. But I think this is a really exciting technology. I'm hoping that Claudiu will get in with a lot of companies that don't have legacy software that they feel they've made an investment in. They don't want a stranded investment in it. They don't want to try something new. They can be very resistant to things that are new, and especially because yours has taken it not only from XR training, but even a new kind of XR training. So you've taken step two. And I think they're sometimes very slow to adopt something that's staring them right in the face. And if they've got a lot of legacy stuff, it's really harder for them to say, yes, we need to have this. Or maybe later when we see everybody else and what they've done, we'll think about it.
It's a very, very fair point. What we're trying to do is come as friends, not foes, right? So look, you have already, maybe big companies have their own XR development team inside, right? So look, we're not going to come and replace your knowledge. We just say, look, we're helping you focus because these companies, these experts have to build the secret IP things that we cannot build for them, right? They have their own know-how and they have to focus on that. And we come and say, look, we're helping you with everything else. So bring your know-how in our platform.
Right.
Instead of wasting time. And luckily, the problem with legacy software doesn't really exist in the XR space because XR is kind of relatively new. It's not as bad as the other system. It does exist, but not to the extent of other industries where you have software from the 70s still running on Fortran or whatever, like COBOL. So you don't have necessarily that kind of problem, but there is some kind of resistance of these kind of, let's say, XR experts to understand what we're doing. The moment we show them that we're friendly, then they say, it's amazing. We can actually focus on what we actually love doing. not the whole thing that we like optimizing models, that we don't want to do that. We want to focus on the semiconductor secret sauce that we have to implement for customers. So this is exactly how we're approaching things, right? We're going exactly say, look, we are coming as friends. We want to help you accelerate processes, and you, as the experts, focus on what you know best, and which you cannot share, or maybe some of it you can, but most of it you can share, and everything else we share together in this platform that MetaNeural is building. So this is hopefully, again, we're hopefully to build this kind of platforma franca, if you want, of the extra training space where everybody can join in and they see the benefits. And again, but you're right. This is a point that we're also looking very carefully at, because again, we want to make sure that we target the right people, the right decision makers, that they understand what we do very well, so that they support us instead of becoming our, let's say, like a refractory, or let's say refractive to our proposal.
Let me try to summarize. Let me try to summarize here. What we have discussed here is I love this whole cloud capitalism thing that we're going to need to trademark for Johnny. So I hear a bunch of key benefits and value propositions, right? I hear enhanced engagement and retention. I hear practical skill development. I hear accessibility and scalability. I hear data-driven insights. I hear cost efficiency, right? And then I also hear content development. Obviously technology, infrastructure, user experience, and also integration with existing systems, right?
Yeah.
I have a question about how do you measure ROI for the student and for the company? I don't know if you are developing tools for that, or a dashboard or something like that. But then I'm curious about what's coming next. What about AI? What about haptic feedback? What about collaboration and social learning? What about AR for on-the-job support? What about metaverse training? I think you talked a little bit about that. And then things like but the biggest question right now for me as we close chapter here is, do you have the right measuring ROI for your clients, or how are you helping them realize that they're getting their money's worth?
So basically, the answer to that is that based on our analytics and the modules we provide them, they can literally see what the before and after results were in a lot of let's say, of the fields we're trying to cover. And you mentioned a lot of the technologies that's not in the future. We already have those in the platform. So what you mentioned, the haptic stuff, and in different forms, we have haptic gloves that can help. We have, if needed, we can support haptic suits. So full body suits, but again, those are very rare cases where we need that level of immersiveness. We can even simulate smells, right? So there are so many things, artificial smells, that we can create in VR. So the future is not even that far; it's actually here now. There are other things. Again, the biggest changes for us will be the computational power of the future, and the complexity of the AR, how well the AI models are going to reason, lowering this kind of hallucination aspects, which we do now by using multiple systems and kind of cross-checking the information to make sure that every output is consistent within the different models. So these are all things that we're working on, but this is the future in that sense. And for the return on investment part of things, again, it's, I would say, really easy in a sense, right? Because you can see the before and the after. We can give an example. Some training used to take, let's say, 2 weeks, and now it's down to 2 days, or it used to take 2 months, and now it's down to 2 weeks. Imagine what happens between that. How many and also the multi-user component, where you have multiple people joining in the same experience at the same time, so doing things together. It's not only about the individual training, right? So there are so many things that we're currently supporting, and all of these are basically contributing to the societal aspect of that John mentioned, right? Because now we are building things together. The training doesn't happen on the individual, but it happens on the team trying to perform a task together, which is also very important for a lot of, I mean, all industries have this problem, right? So these are the things that we're trying to address now. And again, the ROI is one of the key of, let's say, selling points for us, because we are able to show how well this is going to improve whatever processes they want, whether it's the time it takes to do something, or the money that you need to do something. And in the end, to bring the complexity, our value proposition is we can bring a lot of complexity for in a very affordable time and price, let's say, frame, which is to us very important. And for most companies, even in good times and bad times, a very, very, let's say, interesting proposition. So we hope to be always a need to have instead of nice to have, right? That's our goal, and hopefully we're getting there. Okay, you're muted again. I think
You're muted. You're muted, Andreas. You're muted.
Oh. Closing remarks. Linda, go first.
I think this is really exciting technology. I really like Claudiu's approach to getting his technology in the market. I think it's just genius the way you'll have one industry proselytized to the next, and so you'll have a continuity of experience, which is really very cost effective in the end. And I think that, as you said, Claudiu, a couple of months ago or even a year ago, you couldn't have done anything like that. But the technology is moving along and is allowing you to do what you're doing and speed it up. And I think that there's just going to be this big harmonic conversion of your moment with your technology. I think you're in the right place at the right time. So the planets are aligning for you. I've looked into the tea leaves here, and I think the planets are aligning for you. So good luck with your technology.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the feedback. Very, very interesting points you raised, and thank you for that. Yeah, we believe the same. This is the time to do it. And we have to be the first, and we have to do it well. We have to execute it very well to prove the value of this. So thank you for the feedback.
Johnny, closing remarks.
I think that the new managerial science, I think it's the way to make things happen. I think it's a way for experts or managers to understand how to get things done. And it's very, very exciting in this cloud. It doesn't matter if it's a computer program or if it's a hammer. The issue still remain the same to get things done among human behavior. So we got to understand that unlike physics, humans think all of the time. And we're gonna draw from equations, but at the end of the day, we're not rocks. We have an agency. You know what I mean? We think, and I think all managerial science. Some people use hammers, some people use technology, and I think technology has really, really advanced for the cloud capitalism.
Well, I look forward to the time where I can log into the MetaNeural and download my program to teach me how to play guitar in 30 seconds.
Do an amazing job to surprise or even
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, well, let's see. Again, it's the approach that matters. Is finding the right way to get that information over to them. But again, we're looking into that in the future. Literally, after we do the industry stuff, we also want to explore this kind of, let's say, more entertainment place. So.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you. Claudiu. Johnny, take us away.
I had a hammer. I'll hammer in the morning. I'll hammer in the evening. All over this land. I'll hammer out danger. I'll hammer out morning. I'll hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters. All over this land.
Well done. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, sir. And take care of yourself. And tell Angelo that I love him. He's a good man.
I'll try to make sure to convey the message. Thank you very much. I do believe it.
All right, take
Bye,
care.
Claudiu.
Bye,
Thank you very much for having me. Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you.